Okay, Uja will begin. Makiru, Heru, Makiru, Duara Sara Satiru, Om Mati Makiru, Heru, Makiru. Attack. Okay. So today we're going to look at two temples because there is a special teaching regarding Heru Behudet that I've shared with one other class before, but I want to share it with you in more detail as a more targeted and directed presentation discourse on the very profound and important principle. So let's make our way to the hypostyle hall. First, let's take a look around. With the small chapel in front of the temple to Heru Behudet Edfu. You can see the mud brick enclosure wall. And in the distance, you can see the two pylons of the temple. And those pylons represent the goddesses Aset and Nebuchadnezzar. Now we'll move from here. And we'll go here. And now we're going to find ourselves when I do a screen share. In the open court area, which is the peristyle court. You can see on the periphery of the court, you have the columns that are holding up a roof to a porch. And you have an open court. We're standing out here in the distance. We walked up. You walk inside, you go past the pylons. And you come into the temple. You can see how massive the pylons are. You look at the size of the people to the size of the pylons. And in ancient times, there would be a very large door here, 60, 70 feet, however. And those who come into the peristyle court will not be allowed to pass that door to enter into the hypostyle hall of the temple. And this porch design is similar to the porch design that you see in a Temple of Edfu. You have the large Heru Ankh statue with the double crown on his head. And we'll talk more about that a little later. So now let's go into the covered portion of the temple. We're going to stop at the hypostyle hall. So I'm going to do this in a way that, okay, here we go. And then behind this column is the entrance. So we're on the right side as you walk in. And now we're in the hypostyle hall. You can see the hall of many columns. You see the bases of the columns that are holding up the roof. And here's the library that was held in this temple where the religious writings were kept. What is referred to as Book of the Dead, etc. Wisdom texts. Were kept here. Now you can see the columns in relation to each other. This visual exercise is very important. You're not in ancient times or earlier period. These columns were painted, so it had a visual effect, powerful visual effect, and that's part of the mechanism of the temple. When you go into the temple, is to experience that visual effect, and it has an effect in your deep unconscious that you're unaware of at the time that it's happening. But you have to be sensitive to it. If you're like a normal, regular tourist that's just coming in here to talk about architecture or just to see the sites or to talk about engineering and stuff like that, they'll miss you. Well, or lost technology, all of those kind of things are good, to explore and understand. But if that's where your mind is, you lose the metaphysical experience, the metaphysical effect that the temple is designed to convey. But you have to be sensitive to that. You have to be properly initiated and properly led under proper preceptorship. Otherwise, it's just a walkthrough. And on this one, you have a very important formula: was, ankh, was, neg, all the way around. And you have various presentations of Heru on these columns. So let's look at it from a different vantage point. And everything we're doing is leading up to something. So now we're going to take the vantage point from the center of the room. Okay, and we've done the same glitch it was before. Okay. Now here's the vantage point from the center of the room. You can see this is kind of a smaller, although it's a good size. It's not a very big hypostyle hall. You can see the other side, the other library. And again, in ancient times, you would not be able to, there would be a door here. So you will not be able to look into the first hypostyle hall, which would, this one would be the second hypostyle hall. If you're looking at the temple from the inner shrine outwards, which is the proper perspective from which to view the temple. When you are going through the ritualistic process, you're working through the temple and going deeper and deeper into the temple so that you can achieve the vantage point of looking at creation from its point of generation, which is the single point from which creation manifests from, which is netter. As opposed to staying outside in the open court and looking towards the inner shrine. You're you're working towards becoming established in the inner shrine, where you are now looking at the manifestation of the creation of the essence of one's own being. So here is Heru being propitiated by the royal. Here's Heru and the set. Here's Heru and the set again, goddess. So you see lots of depictions of Heru. And Heru Behudet, he's the warrior, but that's kind of like a general theme of Heru. What Heru Behudet actually means is spiritual power. And that spiritual power is what you use to vanquish one's own ego. You have to be able to discover that spiritual power, which vanquishes all delusion. So the mystery of the temple is the mystery of one's own spiritual evolutionary process. It's not something outside of yourself. And these wars, the war scenes on the temple, are metaphorical wars. They're not actual wars. And actual wars, like say that the Battle of Kadesh, which may have been an actual war, is actually mythologized by the temple. They don't take that stuff literally. The initiates, the ones who are allowed to enter into the mystery of the temple are not taking those things literally. They're taking those things mythically. The presentations on the temples are not to be taken as 99.9% of it is to be taken in a metaphorical, mythical manner, not in a literal, from a literal perspective. And if the mythical, metaphorical principle of spiritual evolutionary process is eliminated, then you have a literal interpretation, and that seeds strife and chaos and conflict. If it's metaphorical and it's being taught as a yogic process of psycho-spiritual development, then you realize that your own ego is your true enemy. And that's what the temple is talking about. That's what Heru is about. Heru Behudet is about, not fighting things outside. It's fighting one's own ignorance and overcoming it, vanquishing it through spiritual vigor, spiritual strength, and spiritual power. You have to learn how to tap into those higher forces. Okay, so now we're going to go over to another temple to put our lesson together for what we'll be talking about. So we're taking a little detour from the text, but we're going to get back to the text. But I wanted to add a visual temple component as well, so we can have a well-rounded and make it well-rounded. So here is a small temple to Maat and Heru. Near what is referred to as the village of the worker. This is actually a neighborhood. In this neighborhood, people who designed the Valley of the Kings, some of the artisans lived there. If you go out this side entrance, the tourists usually come in through this side. The true opening of the temple is through this opening. And on this side, you have the remnants of the neighborhood. And you have tombs of nobles, of burial places of nobles. And this is the entrance to the temple. Again, you see the two pylons style. You know, this one is connected at the top, but it's the same principle of having the two sides and a central opening. And again, all the doors were removed for one reason or the other. And again, you have the mud brick wall. And so now we're going to move further into this temple. And so when you walk in here, you walk through this opening. You come in here. You come to this which is a mini hypostyle hall. Here you see a column here, used to have the roof. See, the part of the roof is missing. And then, as you can see, you have to walk up. So the highest point of any temple is the holiest room of the temple. And you're constantly moving up. And you can see here you have on the columns to the sides. So I believe this is south and north. Or you have the face of goddess Heru. And then you have the flowered columns in the front. And again, a door would be here. So let's go further, deeper into this temple. And then you walk up here. So we were back here where this gentleman is sitting. We were in this area. And again, we're confronted with that special formula. Sehuankh was. And you have three major shrines or shrine rooms. You have one in the center, one on the left, one on the right. And we are going to, this here, where that is cordoned off, this is a staircase that leads up to the roof of this temple. So we could go right, center, or left. And we're going to go left. As you can see, here is the symbol of Heru Behudet above the opening of the temple, the main shrine room of the temple. You see, these stars would mean, the stars on the roof would symbolize the night sky region, you know, the heavens. But in the tombs, the so-called tombs, the metaphysical devices in the Valley of the Kings, it has a different connotation. You have to read into it differently because of what's there and what's being presented. It's a different nuance to the same principle. So now let's make our left. And enter into this area. And you see here. Well, actually, we made a right. This is okay, okay, we made a right. So let's look around while we're here. You see, this is Heru, the vindicator of his father. It says it right here. It says, Miduje an Heru anetej and def words pertaining to Heru, the vindicator, redeemer of his father. And so he's the one that wages the battle and overcomes Set, you know, subdues Set, and brings Set in accord with protecting the spirit, protection of spirit. And the royal is a Ptolemaic, is a Ptolemy, is offering flowers to Heru. While Heteru is looking on, she's counting time. And it says it here, you know, she's counting millions and millions of years. You know, and he's having all life to his body parts as Ra forever. That's what's happening to the Buddha as he's giving the offering to Heru, who's the vindicator of the Father. So through this act, and being supported by Heru, he's gaining spiritual illumination of all his body parts. That's all his the aggregates of the entity from the Ankh all the way to the physical body. So all that illumination from the Ankh is permeating through all of the facets of the entity. And beyond the Ankh is the essence of entity, which is pure spirit being, pure spirit consciousness. And that's the Heru Behudet of the Heru and Edfu, the vindicator. Okay, so let's see if we can make our left. Let's see. Have okay, here we are. We made our left. So it was nice to walk through the temple. And we're in the small hall to Maat. And what's important in this hall for the study that we'll be doing is this depiction of the hall of Maat. And this theme is coming up more and more now. It's that our theme, it was our theme, and we'll continue with this theme in the Heru Behudet class. And it's our theme on our Saturday morning. And it also plays in with Heru Behudet, as you will see shortly. So you have the two Maati goddesses supporting and cajoling the initiate to enter into the hall of Maati, where his heart is laid against the feather of Maat. And there are three outcomes. If the heart is heavier, then you will be met with Amit, with this creature. And that signifies, suffering, pain, depression, anxiety, frustration, negative emotional states and conditions. If your heart is just as light as a feather, then you enter into the netherworld from the perspective of the Dua. The Dua text, you enter into the Dua region. When you have an existence there, you have an experience, and you keep moving up until you enter into the shrine and sit on the throne of a step. If your heart is lighter than the feather of Maat, then you go directly to Asar, who is sitting in the shrine waiting to receive you. And from the perspective of our AEM Sunu class, Sunu perspective, here you have the 4 sons of Heru here, standing on the lotus, which is 10, which is completion. And then from the perspective of our Saturday, you have the 42 Maat divinities, the cosmic powers that preside over each of the one of the 42. So it's all here in one synthesis, as you have here Heru, who is working the balance scale. And he is Heru Sa, Aset, Heru the son of Aset. And he's being helped out by the cat divinity, Meow. And Jehuti is recording the outcome in the hall of Maat. It says it here. You say he's the scribe of Maat, the great scribe of Maat in the hall of Maat. So he's inscribing truth. And then you have another form of Heru, who is standing on a crook, which is the power of being a shepherd. And the power to rule. And he's in his form of, he has the Picard kind of energy with the chai lock on the side of his head. And so now that we walk through, now we have to check time. And trying to set this up for you. So we have a few minutes. And now let's get to what we're going to talk about. And this was presented in the Goddess Net class. But like I said before, do a little more detail on it for this class. Here you have on the left, this is from the Temple of Heru Behudet, as we just walked through. And here's a depiction of Maat from the Temple of Asar. We hear the important point I'm trying to get across with this is this to show the offering of Maat to Heru Behudet, to Khonsu in this form of Heru Behudet. And we know that because the text tells us that. But the point is that, and the Ma'at is on the bowl that means net. So it means all truth, all righteousness is being offered to Heru, which in this context is the mind that is illuminated by spirit, because he's coming forth as the moon, as Khonsu. So it's the mind that is the spirit mind that is the vanquisher of the ignorance of delusion, of mind. And so it's the realization of spirit being behind mind. And all truth, all righteousness, all goodness is being offered to them. And by all truth, it means all truthfulness. So mastery of the 42 precepts of Maat. But also on a higher level, it means the full realization of truth, which is the realization of divine nature. So divine nature is being offered to spirit, mind. You have a synthesis, you have a union of the two, where the two become fused as the one spirit essence. And here I wrote here, this is not written anywhere here. This is an Egyptian proverb. They who revere Maat are long lived. They who are covetous have no tomb. And by long live, it means eternity. And you have to think about what it is to don't have a tomb. If you don't have a tomb, it means that you're in the land of the living. You're alive all the time in your temporal body. So you die, you get buried, you become born again. You die, you get buried, you become born again. You don't have a tomb. You have not gone to the West and remained. So you don't have a place, you don't have a station where the process of incarnation has been extinguished. You're constantly in the land of what is referred to as living, which is a delusion. People believe that this is life. It's from a perspective of the normal mind, you can conceive of this as life. From the perspective of truth, immortality is life. Life doesn't mean breathing air and eating food and defecating, and that's not what constitutes life. That constitutes the coming together of temporality and infinity to form a principle that can be construed as life. But what is true life is infinity, which is one's own true divine nature. And if you have Ma'at, you can have a long, healthy, joyous life. And then at the end, you're not holding on. That would be a great danger, to hold on at the end. Try to hold on at the end. And that's quite interesting, because at the time of death, actually, there is a letting go of the current life. So there's a kind of a letting go that takes place. But it's a letting go that is predicated on a desire to repeat life. So it's not a true letting go. It's an illusion of letting go. Because the desire to repeat life is still ingrained. So there's a reincarnation that takes place. And in the process of spiritual evolution, you're trying to vanquish that desire for human existence. You're not a human being. You're not a spirit having a human experience. You're not a human being having a spiritual experience. You're a spirit being having a human experience. And that human experience is illusory, non-abiding, and temporal. And here is the pinnacle of our. This is found in the Temple of Heru. And here you have Heru Behudet. Here you have the goddess Maat. And there are two very important line of text associated with her. In this, on this panel. Meduje and Maat hebt Heru Behudet as Uja. And that's this line of text here. I think I can make it larger. Let's make it a little bigger. Now on a PowerPoint, it's easier to see when you make it big. In Word, so Meduje and Maat have so apt is right here. Her apt Heru Behudet as Uja. Words ascribed to Maat. She's the burning fire of spiritual power as the innermost personality of Heru Behudet. So she is, Heru Behudet is from mythological perspective, he is the divinity that is at war with the facets of Seth. And you have to think of that from the perspective of myth. What I mean by that is that it is not something that is not true. It is something that is occurring metaphysically within you. And when you take on the spiritual path of life, there's an aspect of you that is a counterforce to the principles of egoism coming through your own ego. And the degree to which you're able to vanquish that egoism is the degree to which Maat is the presiding power, the presiding force of that spirit inclination to vanquish the negativities of mind. And therefore, she is the power behind the movement of Heru. Behudet. She is the innermost power behind that capacity to vanquish the proclivities of the ego. So she's the innermost reality of that spiritual force, that spiritual power that is at odds with unrighteousness of the heart and delusions of the mind. So Maat is the power behind it. She's the force behind it. She's the, so actually it is Maat who is vanquishing the ego through the force of Heru. So she's the engine behind Heru. So truth is operating through Heru to counteract untruth, to counteract ignorance, misunderstanding, unrighteousness. She's the power force that is behind that. So if you awaken her capacity within yourself and how you awaken her capacity, you abide by her principle, you abide by her philosophy, you abide by her abiding principle, which is the principle of truth. And so you have to be a seeker of truth. And most people are seeking for something that they already have. In other words, most people in their search are only trying to validate something that they think they already know. So they're trying to validate their own delusions, and that's not a search for truth. The search for truth vanquishes what you think you know, what you thought you know, what you think you ought to know, which is not really knowing. And the true knowing is not an intellectual knowing, it's a realization. It's a mystical realization of the nature of truth, which is spirit consciousness being, spirit essence, is what Heru Behudet signifies. So righteousness is working through the power of spirit to vanquish unrighteousness. And in that way, there can be vindication, there can be movement towards reclaiming one's own true divine nature through realization, not creating, realizing, coming to the awareness of removing the misapprehension of what one thinks life is, what one thinks life ought to be. So truth is the power that facilitates the spiritual evolutionary process of a human being. Righteousness orderliness, reciprocity is another word, meaning being reciprocal with the divine. And that is offering, giving the offerings. And what you're offering is, you're offering all righteousness, all truth to the same Heru that is on the path to vanquishing the ego, the principle of egoism, and the function of egoism through your personality. So you offer Maat to Heru, whose innermost power essence is Maat, and that fuels the power of spirit to vanquish the darkness. So where there is light, darkness cannot remain. And so that will do it for this evening. There's another line of text we'll discuss. Next time we'll come back to this, conclude with this, and then starting on the second line of text, and that will be that. And then we'll get into the go back to the text proper after. Okay, any brief questions before we go? So a lot to talk about, a lot to contemplate and think about. And as part of the process, to think, to contemplate, to arise at a higher, deeper understanding. And then that releases one from, from the world of pain and suffering. So the path to freedom from being bounded to the world. Okay, so we'll pick up more next time. And we'll do our closing chant. The Sistra with the face of Goddess Heru. Heru ma 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 Heru. Duara Sara Set Heru. Duara Sara Set Heru. Duara Sara Set Heru. Duara Sara Set Heru. Om Mati Ma Heru. Hitet. Dua everyone until we meet again. Hitet.
Hitet.